All right, good evening, everyone. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Capital Improvement and Street Maintenance Committee for the City of Wausau to order. Today is Thursday, April 8th, 2020. The first item of business on our agenda for tonight is to approve the minutes of our September 10th meeting, copies of which are in the packets. Did anyone observe any changes or corrections that they would like made to the minutes? If not, a motion to approve the minutes would be appropriate. Motion by Larson, is there a second? Second by Neal. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? None are opposed. Minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding the disposition of the old West Side Fire Station at 510 South 32nd Avenue. You'll recall that we had held up on this decision for a number of months to see if the private sector was able to pull together their proposed plan for a senior center on the site. That group and their efforts has opted not to continue. They were not able to generate the momentum that they had hoped. So that said, we now have to decide what to do with that building. You have a memo in your packets from Mary Ann indicating that they feel the best approach to that is to advertise the building through a commercial realtor. Doing a survey of the market, they've located a realtor that provided the most competitive commission share, assuming that they were able to sell that building for us. And that proposal came from Hawking Real Estate. Does anyone have questions on that building or on listing it? All they want us to do tonight is to approve them to go ahead and list it and see what offers come in. Okay, we have a motion to approve by Neal. We have a second by Wadinsky. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor of listing the property signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on stop sign placement at the intersection of Boff Street and South 8th Avenue. You'll recall that we had some initial discussion on this item, and we had decided to wait until we had a little more data about what we wanted to do with the intersection of 8th and Buff. Alder Larson has been getting some feedback from within his district asking for that measure to be taken. And so we had waited a little bit on our decision. And we have Lieutenant Cord Buckner with us on WebEx. Cord, do you have any new information or new statistics to offer us on that corner?
I guess I'd defer to Alan on the most recent counts he did on that area that coincided a little bit with what our speed study did on Bob Street in that location.
Okay.
It seems to be consistent with that.
Bring up our city engineer, Alan Wazlowski. Welcome.
Yeah. So the write-up is in the packet. We did put traffic counters on Boff and on 8th for the week of September 22nd to the 28th. And you can see the map in there in the write-up. There's about average weekday of about 900 or 885 cars on Boff and an average weekday of 250 on 8th Avenue. So also the average speed, there was a concern about speeding. According to the data here, the average speed was about 25.5 miles an hour, and it was within the range for the 85th percentile speed. So the 85th percentile was 30 miles an hour, which is within acceptable range. So staff is not recommending any changes to those signs, to keep the stop signs on 8th.
On 8th and none on Buff?
Correct.
Okay. And is this something that we feel, at least incidentally, that we can perhaps get control of in response to the neighborhood concerns with some targeted enforcement? Or, versus we try to not use stop signs to control speed. So what are our thoughts about, having the sector patrol see if in between calls, if they could kind of watch that area? Is that possible, Cord?
Yeah, that's always possible, but as I have to sort of caveat that is to be consistent in any one area in the city with traffic patrol and speed enforcement is difficult to be able to promise simply because of all other competing traffic concerns and then the higher volume of calls that we get from year to year. So, I think that with the speed study that we did, it shows, it can show times where there's more likely to be larger discrepancies in the speeding concerns. Like, for instance, one of the higher ranked speeds here was like 46 miles an hour on Alan's report, I think. But sometimes, and sometimes we forget, or I forget too, to even mention that sometimes higher speeds, outlying speeds, can be emergency vehicles going through those areas. So it doesn't necessarily indicate a resident, although it can. So one of the reports that we run does show sort of times where there's more volume of traffic and potentially more volume of people that are exceeding the speed limit at a range that that goes beyond the tolerance, so to speak, for that area. So those are the things that we would look at in providing a sector car, providing extra patrol. But again, to be there consistently is always difficult to promise.
Well, I think historically, a lot of the complaints have indicated in the past when we considered it in this committee that the times that are immediately before and after shift change at Colby seem to bear some correlation to when they see an increased speed there. So, I guess just depending on what you get in the report for, the peak times to enforce, I think we all certainly would understand that that would be done as time permits. We wouldn't expect them to, place that monitoring over emergency calls, but in the event that the sector officer would have time to kind of keep an eye in that area, we'd certainly appreciate that. Committee members, if you're not intending to take action, we don't have to have a motion on this item. So what is the feeling of the committee? Let's discuss this item. Alder Larson, go ahead.
I would like to see stop signs placed on that corner because the feedback I get from the neighborhood is that taking them down was the biggest mistake the city made on that corner. They had them up when Thomas Street was under construction, and all of a sudden they took them down with no warning, and the people want them back up. It's just plain and simple as that. I mean, and if you can't control speed with stop signs, how else can you control the speed if you're not going to offer 24/7 protection? I mean, the neighborhood wants the stop sign up. It's just that simple. Thank you, Madam Chair.
It is. So are you making a motion then to either adjust the stop signs or add some? And then we can see what feedback we get from the committee there.
I would like to make the motion then to add the stop signs to Bob and 8th.
And remove them from 8th and place them on Buff?
Could do that, yes.
To turn them around? Okay, do we have a second for Mr. Larson's motion? We have a second by Neil. Now, we should also discuss this because we did have some robust discussion about this when we dealt with 10th and Stark. And, there was some concern among our enforcement staff as well as alders about deviating from MUTCD standards and creating a liability situation by placing those signs against the standard that we subscribe to. Alder Ryan, did you have a comment to make? I saw your hand go up. Or no?
And it's going back to Sherry Abbott, and I agree with Lou that I'm supporting his motion.
Okay. Additional comments? Go ahead, Jim.
How many people are complaining? Who are they? Is it 2? Is it 1? Is it 100? Was it bad before the stop signs went up during construction and they didn't say nothing, or wasn't it bad then? I mean, is it just all of a sudden? I mean,
I can't give you that answer.
We're starting to put up stop signs because we get a couple complaints from neighbors, and that's not really our purpose in this committee. Our purpose is to make sure the traffic is safe, flowing correctly according to standards, and we have to, I mean, I can't support it for just that reason. I mean, if we have a petition with several households, maybe a dozen or more households, that would be different. That would be looked at differently. But if it's just 1 or 2 people, how can 1 or 2 people control the lives of thousands that might have to go through that area in a month? If it's not perceived as a real safety hazard at this time. I mean, this is happening all over the city the same.
Right.
There's lots of cars doing 25, maybe 30 miles an hour in neighborhoods, but I mean,
Right. In our past discussion, which may have been captured in the minutes that are attached here, when Alder Abbott's had received the same requests in 2018 toward the end of her tenure, it was not a large number, but it was consistently the same number and the same individuals that live in the immediate vicinity. And so that said, at that time, the committee opted to not act on making that change. In fact, it seems that after the stop signs were put in at Thomas Street, when the construction ended, they were a little slow at taking them down, and the neighborhood really got used to having them there. But historically, they weren't there prior to that. Was that the situation we were in, I think?
Yeah, correct. And it did come, before we put them up for the street project. This has come up before since I've been here. So I guess, with the motion, though, to remove the stop signs off of 8th, I think would definitely be not a good decision, because then you'd have that flow through traffic that, because Boff has such more traffic than 8th, that there would be even more of conflicts, I think, there, and issues there. So, like when we did it during Thomas Street construction, we put the stop signs up, but it was a 4-way stop at that intersection, so.
Okay. Alder Larson.
Let me rescind that motion, and then I'll make a motion that we make that intersection a 4-way stop as it was.
Okay.
This has been an ongoing problem for years and years, as you can see, and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Okay. So is that amendment to the motion or revised motion good with the second, Ms.
A
Ryan?
revised motion.
Revised motion?
Lisa?
Oh, you were the second. I'm sorry, Tom. Is that good with you as the second? Okay. Yep, Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, if I just, my job is to just, let people know what the status of the law is. So I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, but I'm just going to say that state statute requires that local authorities, when establishing traffic control devices, which includes signs, shall conform to the uniform manual on traffic control devices. So I just want you to know that's our statutory obligation, and I don't enforce anything, but I just want it on the record.
Okay. And I think that was the concern we've had in the past, where if we're not in compliance with those standards, the law says we shall comply. It doesn't say we have the option to not comply. So that's something that we need to, I think, take into consideration as we weigh our discussion. Additional, go ahead.
So when we had that 10th Street discussion, I know one of the alders said, well, I've seen other instances of intersections, with these kind of things, and they kind of use the intersection that isn't proper as support for continuing to do the improper thing. And so, this is where we'll go. Someday, years from now, someone will say, well, there's an intersection, at Boff and 8th Avenue, and you can't tell me that, that one meets those criteria. And so then we sort of start this precedential sort of traffic control thing. So I have nothing else to say.
Sure. Where we left off with 10th and Stark, though, was that, we ended up with a 4-way there, and the criteria did indicate that where the traffic is relatively equal on both streets. And so when we went back and we got that traffic collection, it really wasn't that far off on the one versus the other. But if we find that there's a much more significant volume on Boff than there is on 8th, we're really not in the same realm as we were with 10th and Stark. So I caution us, I guess, to use 10th and Stark as a benchmark. Even though we made a change there, the traffic counts in this road seem to be very different, I guess. Do we have any additional? Jim, go ahead.
I think you're right on that point. That's a different situation altogether. If we want to start putting 4-way stops up, that's fine with me, but we've got to have a lot more in a lot different places if we're going to do it for this criteria, because it's happening in a lot of places. But my personal feeling and professional feeling is that we should abide by the statutes, follow the regulations. Our job is to not do something on a whim and just make a couple people happy. Our job is to make it right for everyone according to regulation and statistics. So I just can't support it for that reason. Thank you.
This is a little bit of a slippery slope, and this is the situation that happened when Wausau had a parking and traffic committee before the duties of that committee were merged into this one. And what happened often in that committee is that the parking and traffic committee became a soapbox for neighborhood concerns and disputes, where you would have a small number of citizens that would, run a petition, or they would come to the committee and, then get their way. And then stop signs were either installed or things were modified based on that. And what it really allowed was an element of politics to enter into the application of traffic standards. And so when the two committees merged back then, when that first happened, I was the chair of this committee still, and then I had a hiatus from it for 4 years. Now I'm back. But my directive to the staff at that time when we merged those two committees was, please, 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 make as many of these decisions at the staff level using the MUTCD standards as possible. Because as soon as one intersection goes through a political process like this, you're going to have 10 more. Because there isn't an alder among us that has not received complaints either about speeding, parking, or heavy traffic in one area versus the other, traffic complaints, basically. And so I made that mistake at the corner in my district of North First Avenue and Boss Creek Drive. And my residents went out when there was such a committee, and they went and got a petition, and they installed a stop sign at the bottom of a hill. That's a real treat in the winter, both for the plow drivers and the motoring public. And it has not fixed any of the problem that they were complaining about, other than now you have speeding and people running the stop sign or sliding through it. So I hope that my experience serves as a cautionary tale, because it didn't work. And, so I hope that as a committee, we aren't going to start to tread down a slippery slope where every month we are in this position where we have to make a political decision about traffic controls. If there's changes that are legitimately necessary, like what we have coming up at First and McIndoe, or like what we just did last month at Third and McIndoe, that's different because the standards dictate something based on a change we're making. But every month, we really could be put in a tough spot politically if we try to adjudicate every stop sign request in response to speed. So I guess, committee members, do you have any other comment? Jim, go ahead.
I think what these problems really need is police presence, and not just a sector officer to go there when he has time. We need to work with the police department and maybe help them somehow to maybe have a part-time traffic unit that if we get a problem, take their 2 or 3 people that like doing that kind of thing and get them out there and start hammering those people that are causing this problem. I mean, there's officers that don't like to write tickets, but they do it because that's their job. There's officers that love it. They do a good job at it, but they're still reasonable. They don't, they take the ones that really deserve it. Mm-hmm. And you need to get those people out there and take care of this problem, because even if you put stop signs up, people aren't going to learn to slow down.
Well, and sometimes
the rest of the street's still going to be fast.
Right, and sometimes what happens, I think we find, is that we often end up relying on either grant funding or special enforcement funding to really conduct a focused enforcement, like a high enforcement week or weekend, when we have that funding for some overtime to tend to those problems. And this isn't the first time I've heard about maybe looking at a traffic enforcement unit that can move around town and get to where the trouble spots are. And once a few citations get issued, you'd be surprised how word gets out. And then when that effort lets up, people go back to their old behavior. So it's something that I find in my neighborhood. I think immediately of Campus Drive. It needs continuous maintenance. Lakeview in District 1, same exact problem. And so, that's something that maybe from a budgetary standpoint we should look at going forward versus, other controls.
And that's a great public relations, too. They like seeing the police out there taking care of their problems.
It does increase the perception of safety as well. Alder Larson.
That's fine, but until that time, we've got more traffic going down Bob because people can't turn on and off Thomas Street like they used to. And that's why we're getting the complaints and the speeders going up there. And this has been an issue ongoing for years. This is just not something that's just popped up overnight. It's been going on for years. and I would like to see that four-way stop placed there. And if that's the case, you know, when we get the officers that you say we need to patrol at, then fine, we'll look at taking it down then. But right now, I'd like to see a stop sign at that corner because it's been a problem intersection, not just recently, but for years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right.
Hi, so this is Brad Sippel. Can I make a quick point?
Certainly. Go ahead, Brad.
So I guess just from a planning perspective, I want to mention that there are a lot of street design cues that you can use to control traffic, and well, not control traffic, but to help control speed and reduce, really reduce speeding. And I guess the research shows that when you use stop signs to try to control that instead of street design cues, it increases the likelihood of crashes. And, you know, because when it's not warranted, people tend to ignore it. So I just want to mention that there's a lot of things outside of traffic control devices using street design that can be used to calm traffic.
Okay. All right. With that, do we have any other comment either from staff or from committee members?
Well,
Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, Brad, what other methods might be employed in this case?
I guess without knowing where exactly the concerns are, I'll just list them generally, but you know, using curb bump outs at intersections generally slows people down. Creating chicanes in the road so it's not a straight, you know, a straight shot. Having on-street parking fully utilized. You know, obviously that, you know, that's not something that you can really force people to do, park on the street, but having people parked on the street usually slows traffic. But really, I guess the thing I think would be most applicable there would probably be adding bump outs at the intersection.
Okay, so if either one of those streets comes up for re-engineering or redesign, you know, we would look at some type of a calming measure at that point. I mean, often we've tried to narrow right-of-way as well. I mean, look at the narrowing that we did on Thomas Street in general versus the original proposed plan, and that was all about traffic calming. Same thing with First Ave becoming one lane between Thomas and Stewart. And so, you know, I think there's ways that we can make that impact, but it's certainly not overnight. Do we have additional comment?
I have a question, you know, not about vehicular traffic, but what's the nature, I'm not familiar with that particular intersection. What's the nature of the pedestrian presence there on a given day?
Have you surveyed that at all, Alder Larson, the pedestrian? If I can recall correctly from the comments that Alder Abbott's made a number of years ago, it's standard neighborhood traffic. It's not the, you know, direct walking path to, you know, a neighborhood school. I mean, their neighborhood school is Jones and it's on the other side. So, you know, it's, I mean, there's obviously people out there walking, but, you know, it didn't seem to be any more, she was more concerned about the vehicular traffic than the bike and ped conflict.
Because, you know, over at 10th, we had the discussion about, you know, Tom Field and the swimming pool.
Yep.
And such. I will say, though, that I know, and I'm not a professional in this, and, you know, so, and I'm
But we
all for
have
your
one.
professionalism, so, but two things. I innately respect a stop sign, and it makes me stop. Now, I don't know if that puts me in the minority. I never, you know, unless I just don't see it, whiz past a stop sign. You know, it stops me. If we are within our power to make it a four-way stop as requested, I would not be against that. You know, yes, I guess, you know, we shouldn't be, you know, breaking the law per se. But if it's within the law for us to do that, then I would support it. And also, as a thank you for the support I got on the 10th Street question. They might not be 100% the same. You know, there's a difference in traffic count and whatnot. But if, you know, Alder feels that their neighborhood is requesting this and there is a history there and it goes back to even an Alder before, it seems supportable and a nice thing to do for the neighborhood.
Right.
So I might be the swing vote on this, Lou.
My only concern is that where the standards indicate that the traffic volume is unequal, that the four-way isn't warranted. And the only way we were able to legitimize the four-way at 10th and Stark was because the recent traffic counts showed that the traffic count was relatively the same. And that's just not the case with 8th and Boff. Boff is way more in terms of traffic count. So even with Thomas Street now being open and not being detoured anymore, they still have more through there. That is the #1 shortcut to Colby for their workforce. So, I mean, and there's a church in that neighborhood as well that, when services are happening, there's a fair amount of traffic down there then as well. So, okay. Any other comment from either staff or committee members? If not, we'll take a vote on this motion.
Well, Madam Chair, I guess, and I'm sorry, Lou, I mean, if we are straddling a line here where, because of the disparity in traffic count, that it would just be, essentially in defiance of the standards we're supposed to follow, I would have to say no.
I think that's what Tara and Alan were trying to tell us.
Yeah.
So that said, though, why don't we go ahead and take a vote on the motion? An affirmative vote would indicate a four-way stop to be created. Members in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Members opposed?
Nay.
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 Okay, let the record show then that motion has failed 3-2. And thank you for that discussion. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on establishing no parking on the west side of the 100 block of South 7th Street. You've got some information in your meeting packets on that as well, along with some photographs where we're having a little bit of trouble with parked cars and access and egress to Olson's Body Shop that has recently opened down there. And let's see, who from engineering has this one? Eric does.
Yeah, so, when I first put this together, thanks to Cord, he took a lot of the pictures and stuff, and then we had prepared this to eliminate parking on the west side in that section on that photo that you see with the yellow line. We did have a public comment that came in. One of the landlords from across the street asked that if we eliminate parking on that section of the west, then that they allow parking on the east side of the street, and because right now the east side of the street has no parking. We couldn't find anything or any knowledge of why, and we didn't see any reason why there couldn't be parking on the east side. And so just based on the information, we don't have an issue if you just want to swap the parking, like the no parking from the west to the east, and or vice versa on that. So the main issue on the west side there, as you can see, when Olson Tire put in their new facility, we have all those additional drive approaches.
Yep.
And so those garages, when people are backing out or pulling in, and visibility and stuff. So.
Well, that does seem to be a fair compromise. I see in the room Kent Olson has joined us. Would you like to offer comment at all? Come on up, state your name and address for the record, and we'll accept your comments.
Thank you. Kent Olson, Olson Tire and Auto, and Olson Auto Body. I would just share 2 comments about what Eric just said. Number 1 is, since the construction of the Quick Trip that is on Grand Avenue, you talk about traffic count. I don't know that we measure traffic count, but I had an interesting conversation with one of the engineers who acknowledged this. He does it himself. There's a tremendous increase in traffic that is now shooting straight across from the stop sign that is on the corner of 7th and Forest, that now comes straight so that they can jog and get out and go southbound and get to the Quick Trip. So I think that traffic has increased tremendously. I understand the landlord situation, but also being a landlord in a couple other properties right on Forest Street, my comment is you're supposed to have off-street parking for the number of people. You've done a great job of widening the road. We've improved it. You've improved it. I'm very pleased with that. Access and ingress for trucks, whether it be the garbage trucks or trucks delivering parts, is probably going to remain an issue if you do that on the other side. Because, no offense to the parkers there, but they tend to not park right up at the curb. Or they tend to park in the middle of my lot, so, or in the middle of our entrances. So I understand it's a fair compromise, but my comment would be that stretch would, I think, be more beneficial for your traffic, especially the traffic that's cutting across to get to Grand Avenue going south, if both sides were no parking.
Okay. All right. Committee members, do you have additional comment? Alder Neal.
I wonder, I'm interested in going to the east side. Also, though, considering, ingress and egress from the drives themselves, which are mid-block, I wonder if we shouldn't have kind of restricted east side parking where the mid-block portion is signed, no parking between signs.
Like here to corner
Now,
or between signs? Yeah.
Towards the ends, there can be maybe, 2 there and 2 there. That might be enough to take care of the needs of the few houses, in addition to their limited, on-site parking. But it might be a compromise that kind of gets all the jobs done.
Would it be possible to sign that with
Yeah.
a zone in between across
we
from
could-
Olson's driveway?
Yeah, we could eliminate parking on the west side of the roadway, and then also on the southern east side there, across from Olson, their drive approaches there. We were going to back up that parking anyway, just to keep it away from the corner, to keep that intersection open, so.
Sure.
But then the rest of that east side to the north would remain available, and I don't think that would impact where you're at, right, Ken?
Yeah, I don't think so. The main thing is that the trucks, remember Division Street, which you guys, we have collectively worked together over the years to rebuild.
Yeah.
You've got garbage trucks and people trying to go in and out of there, particularly in the wintertime. It's a difficult access and pathway, and every one of those houses along Kickbush is serviced with their garbage on the back side. So as long, I trust your engineering department to figure out the swing. We've already had to have the people next door move their cars because they're parked right up adjacent to get trucks that have gone in and out. So however you guys want to work it out, that's fine. But I do appreciate it if you go to, at least to our side, so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments, Ken.
Definitely. Thank you for coming in.
You bet.
Okay, so as a fair compromise then, Jim, go ahead.
I would support no parking on the west side because of all the driveways, Division Street. If you look at the photo, there's a car parked illegally too close to Division Street right in that photo. And I've been, many, many years, it's been hard to get in and out of Division Street, because of parking there. So I would support that, but I would not want to change the parking on the other side of the street until we get petitions from a resident or two over there that really wants it. Let's get some input from that resident and get some, the only input we have was from a resident that wants his tenants to park on the street, and tenants should not be parking on the street. They have to provide parking.
Okay.
So if we do nothing and wait for them to petition it, then we can take that up as a separate issue when the time comes. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
That actually would make sense because that gives us some time for the neighborhood to try this with the restriction. And if it's not manageable, they certainly could make a request to restore, a couple spaces on the east side to the north of the body shop. So, but we certainly could take that up as a separate item if we need to in the future. Go ahead, Mr.
I
Olson.
could make one more comment.
Certainly.
Part of the parking issue is that the tenants that are in that facility, there are vehicles that are parked in basically storage units in their parking spaces, which is why they don't have off-street parking.
Okay.
So just as informational pieces.
Cars that never move, basically?
Correct.
Okay.
They're storing like weed whackers and stuff in the back seats and digging through things, so
Okay.
just as an informational piece for
Okay.
your decision, so.
Good to know. Go ahead, Alder Larson.
I have a question.
Yes,
Pardon me, I have a question. Are there more than 5 cars in that lot? That are not being moved?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Less than 5, I believe.
So
Probably more than 5 total on the premise. However, there's only
because I
several
believe
that are
there's
not
a
moving.
5-car limit on a premises, isn't there? Because I just had some cars removed in a house in my district that were over 5 cars
I'm not sure, but this situation, our action tonight could actually then cause that landlord to reevaluate the storage situation that's happening to accommodate his tenants. If they can't do that, then we certainly could take up some other item at a future meeting if we need to. Go ahead.
And I don't quite understand what we're voting on here tonight. I would like to see, like what Alder Wadinsky said, I would like to see probably no parking on that street if it's that busy. And because of the fact, like you say, you're backing in and out of that driveway. If there's people parked there, you're going to back into cars and stuff. Let's do some research on a neighborhood first.
Well, that's what the proposal indicates. They're asking us tonight to prohibit parking on the west side of the street, and right now they are parking on the west side of the street. So if we take action the way the staff recommended, you would restrict that.
I guess I would prohibit parking on part of the east side of the street too, so.
The east side is prohibited already.
Yes.
Oh, it is already?
Yeah, so we just need to manage the west side, and then if we need to open up a couple spots on the east side later, we could do that separately.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do we have a motion then to approve the restriction of parking on the west side of 7th Street in this block? Motion by Neal, is there a second? Second by Larson. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on authorizing downtown snow and ice removal. This is an item that we approve every year as part of our municipal budget process. We have a recommended rate per foot for snow and ice removal for the downtown, and those owners are charged based on actual removals. So in a heavy snow year, they're charged for more, and in a lighter snow year, they're charged for less. It looks like the staff recommendation is to approve the current rate. Let's see here. We are looking at, are you looking at staying the course with last year's rate at $7.72?
Well, we wouldn't have a rate, it's based on what the actual cost.
Oh, you divide it up based on the actual?
Right.
Okay.
The examples given are just about the last 5 years that has been charged, just so people know what they can expect, but we can't really recommend a rate, I guess.
Sure.
This just shows you a range. It would be.
Of where it would have been?
Right, it would be based on the actual snow removal.
Okay. Well, let's hope for a light winter. So do we have a motion then to accept this authorization? Motion by Wadinsky, is there a second? Second by Ryan, do I see your hand waving, Deb?
Yep.
Okay, second by Ryan. Further discussion or questions? Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. Item number 6 is an update on bicycle and pedestrian project priorities. And, a number of years ago, we created the Bike Ped Subcommittee and to offer us insight to whether or not we're bike and ped friendly enough. And sometimes they can find out in the community some pretty dangerous things that we need to resolve. Obviously, we can't solve them all at once because sometimes the fixes are super expensive, but we certainly try. So this report comes to us. Brad Sippel actually prepared the report that you have in the packets. Brad, do you want to walk us through the report a little bit and talk about some of these pinch points?
Yeah, I can do that. Thanks for the intro there. I think that's a good point that you made on why we're doing this. And I also thought that this would be good to, we have a lot of bicycle and pedestrian improvement projects identified in adopted plans, and I thought it would be good for the committee to start prioritizing those in order to aid in annual budgeting. So with that said, the 10 to 15 projects here were, after several discussions, kind of identified out of our list of projects in those plans and that have been identified as problem areas through committee discussions and citizen complaints. This was kind of what came out as the highest priority improvements. So I'll walk through them. Anybody can feel free to stop me for questions at any time. And so with that, I'll start with number 1. This is one that the committee's talked about before. It would be the yellow rectangular rapid flashing beacons at the River Edge Trail crossing of the Washington Street Bridge. We've talked about that one before. It's, major trail, gets a lot of pedestrian use, and it's 3 lanes, and it's difficult to cross because of the railroad tracks there, and it's kind of confusing for drivers to yield there. So that's the reason for that one. Next one is bicycle-friendly signal detectors at priority intersections. A test of this was done at Kent Street on the intersection of Kent Street and Grand. And if anybody hasn't tried it, if you're going eastbound on Kent, there's a little bicycle painted on the intersection where you would place the bicycle to actuate the signal to turn the light green, to start the process to turn it green for you. The issue is that bicycles typically don't have enough metal in them to activate the standard actuators, and so those detectors would allow bicycles to actuate that. Now, it is legal for a bicycle to go through a red light if they wait for 45 seconds and it's clear, and it's like, that they know or reasonably assume that it is an actuated signal, but it can create inconveniences when it's a major intersection like Grand Avenue where the traffic flow can be pretty constant. So that's what those would be. There's a few intersections identified that there are consistent problems with at 6th and Washington, the other side of Kent and Grand, and at Sturgeon Eddy Road. We're looking at crossing improvements at the crossing at Henrietta Street and Grand Avenue. That's between the Riverview Towers public housing and a high-use transit stop. So it's a heavily used crossing. There was a pedestrian that was hit and killed there, I believe, last year. It was in January at like 5 p.m., so it was dark. So looking at improving the beacons there, improving the crosswalk, the yield signs, and the crosswalk lighting. First Street is identified in the tool plan around the malls. That's basically kind of doing a lane diet, eventually bringing it back to two-way and adding a two-way buffered protected bike lane, two-way protected bike lane on that corridor. Same thing for Forest Street, identified in the Wausau Center plan as part of the mall, that whole mall area redevelopment to bring the lanes down to travel lanes down to 2 lanes and put a two-way bike facility there. Sherman Street is identified. It's a bike route, part of the regional bike route leads to the trails in Rib Mountain. Identified in the Wausau NPO bike ped plan to basically bring it down from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, one of those being a center turn lane and adding bike lanes on there. Northwestern Avenue is a route connecting Wausau to the Mountain Bay Trail. So again, kind of an important regional connection. And there's bike lanes on a portion of it now, and then wider paved shoulders on a portion of it. And then there's a portion that has narrow paved shoulders that don't really only work for the most enthusiastic and skilled bicyclists, I guess. And then a couple, these two bridges, the Scott Street and Washington Street Bridge, were deemed important as, main thoroughfares into the downtown and crossing the Wisconsin River. Again, it would be a lane diet there, a road diet, removing a travel lane in each direction and bringing bike lanes across that to connect with the Stewart and Scott Street bike lanes that exist now. Thomas Street, again, another regional route and another river crossing. Bike lanes across the bridge, or a bike lane, and then between Grand Avenue and the bridge are seen as gaps there to connect with the bike lanes that were put in with the Thomas Street project west of the river. And then finally, trying to get through these quickly, the First Avenue, adding a bike lane on First Avenue. The majority of First Avenue has a bike lane, but this would basically propose to continue it through the intersection when you're approaching Bridge Street from the south, so that it doesn't, you don't have to merge with traffic for the intersection and then get back into the bike lane once you get through the intersection.
Okay.
But those were identified as the highest priorities.
It does seem that a number of these, really, other than the ones that require rapid flash beacons or intersection modifications, a number of these things are proposed. Would they be achievable by pavement marking projects, basically, over the next few budgets? I mean, not that pavement marking is cheap, but it certainly isn't. But I guess the question that I would have is, if we were going to look at the Scott Street Bridge, the Washington Street Bridge, and the Thomas Street Bridge, The one thing I would want us to make sure before we proceeded there was to make sure that we have railings of appropriate height. When we striped the bike lane westbound on Bridge Street against that parapet wall, we later learned from the Bike and Ped Committee that the wall was not tall enough to accommodate the height of a bicyclist on a bicycle, and that it was very possible that during an evasive maneuver, there's nothing to stop that person from going over. So installing that railing after the fact, I believe that cost us in a CIP project almost $100,000. And that was huge, and it choked that bridge down all summer. So before we would proceed, I'd like us to, on any of these projects, get an accurate depiction of what we estimate the cost might be, but we also need to take a look on those bridges and make sure that the railings are the right height, because we really created our own problem with that. Bridge Street Bridge was originally designed for bike and ped traffic to be on the sidewalk on the south side. It was never designed to be that way on the north side, and when we painted the bike lane, we created the crisis. So I would like us to make sure that we don't need railing modifications and everything else if we're going to put lanes on those bridges, because the bridges are pretty old. Committee members, do you have questions for Brad at all about the report or about any of the projects? I don't believe that we've planned any of these in the 2021 budget. Is that correct, Alan, or do you have some of them lined up?
The RRFBs on the River Edge Trail.
At
for
Washington?
that
Okay.
came to this committee.
Yep.
It was approved, and that is proposed right now in the budget.
Okay.
And I guess every year, we do have a pavement marking project or a pavement marking budget. And every year DPW has a little bit of money for pavement marking. It's getting more and more challenging that the more and more bike lanes we add. If you recall, just recently on Thomas Street, we marked on 3rd Avenue, on 5th Avenue, or 5th Street here. We keep adding a lot of pavement markings, which in Wisconsin with the plowing, you maybe have 5 years. So I think we need to keep in mind that the more we add, the more budget we're going to need for those, because the ones we put in 4 or 5 years ago need to be redone.
Well, that's true, and we've been contracting out that epoxy
Correct.
work, and, because we don't have the equipment to paint with epoxy, but the
Correct.
bigger this gets and the bigger that contract gets, at some point, we should get an idea of what it would cost for us to do in-house epoxy and get the equipment, if this keeps getting bigger and bigger, and if that contract keeps inflating.
Yeah. So it's a challenge every year, because our DPW guys, they'll identify the intersections where epoxy is appropriate, because if you paint at these heavily used intersections, it lasts 6 months to a year. So we go and, crosswalks, stop bars, everything are expensive, especially at our skips through an intersection, through these big intersections. That's where we try and prioritize the money, and then we keep a certain amount to redo bike facilities or add bike facilities. So it's kind of a balancing act to try and find money to do them all.
Would the recommendation, I guess, be on some of these to keep them on the radar, and when other road projects or, road replacements, road expansions start to come up where these would be feasible to look at or add, we would just kind of hold these on the back burner and bring them up as we have either projects or resources that dovetail with them? Is that kind of where we're heading?
Some of these we're going to, I think, like Brad had noted, like around the mall, if that gets redone, the possibility there would be to restripe and redo those or reconfigure those roads. The Scott Street Bridge may be a possibility with the overlay that's coming next summer on that bridge. We're working with the DOT to see if they'll restripe their portion of the bridge, and maybe we could restripe the rest of it. So there are opportunities as projects come up.
And we could do that within the confines of the normal budget if we time it properly, right?
Like I say, there's really no, when I get that budget for like 125,000, there's no set amount to say for it. So it's kind of, if this committee approves or the bike
Right.
ped wants to move on, we try and do what we can.
Sure.
But it is good whenever we can incorporate them in a project, like obviously with First Avenue reconstruction last summer, with Town Line Road reconstruction, and Thomas Street bike lanes were added on those.
I'm a little concerned about the recommendation that we see for the crossing at Grand Avenue and Henrietta Street. I mean, since we already have beacons there, we've already got a well-marked crosswalk, but we also know that we have an awful lot of crossings there. And, that is a 25-mile-an-hour stretch, but there's a lot of pedestrian conflict there. Brad did propose some remedies, which is kind of doing the things that we already have out there, but better. Do we know roughly what the cost of that might be? Or could we figure that out?
I don't think it would be that bad. I guess we'd have to research, too, the legitimacy of putting those RFBs on the above. There are regulations. It is Highway 51, so I think we'd have to work with the DOT to make sure that I guess we'd have to, TJ and myself would have to do a little research to see exactly what we're not opposed to doing it, but I think we'd have to research a little bit, and we could come up with a cost estimate for that. I don't think it's going to be extremely expensive because the structure's there. Obviously, the overhead structure's already there.
Yeah.
The power's already there. So I think there's things we could do.
Is that something you could report back to us on?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
What do you think, committee? Anything else you want to pick out in the report and look at? Go ahead, Deb.
I guess I just wanted to talk about 17th Avenue and Elm Street. A number of years ago, there was a fatal accident right at the bottom of someone riding their bike, but also with the mountain lanes on the verge of opening or opening now. I would think we're going to see a lot of the residents that are, because the grocery store is across the street, that they could be walking. And I guess my days back in the 80s in Chicago, I used a regular grocery cart, and it made it easier, and I think it's going to have that kind of a comeback maybe in this area. So I'm thinking it's not necessarily as much about the bicyclists, but I mean, some may have the capability to, bring their children along, but may not have the capability to do groceries and children. But I think that there will be a lot more pedestrian walking going across. And part of that difficulty is that on the north side of Elm, it happens that there is no sidewalk. When you get to the south part of the plaza, it's grass. But that's where the intersection is going across to Trix, where you have the light on the south side. And so I'm not sure it would be a major type of reconstruction to get it clarified, but that we're seeing within another couple of years, we're going to have another 120 new apartments. So, and then the new apartments that are opening, the 60, and then neighbors doing some walking that I'm seeing back and forth, and that it's a higher priority in my opinion because you do have the groceries and other shopping going on across the street, across the a heavy traffic area compared to being in a residential area. So I'm hoping you can somehow consider that as being something to put on the list.
I think it's certainly something to keep on the radar. One thing that I guess I would mention is we looked at, I think we talked about 17th and Elm after that bike crash when Alderman Ed Gale was chairing this committee. And I think that it was identified that the reason that the pedestrian crossing was on the south side of the street is because the north side, with the way the wall was structured for the plaza, was really making that kind of a blind corner. And you wanted the pedestrians on the south side, not on the north. Does anyone else recall that conversation? I mean, they've always been able to cross on either side, but the pedestrians were encouraged to cross on the south side of 17th and Elm, just because the visibility was a little bit better. But we didn't modify the intersection, we didn't do anything about the intersection, but after that crash took place, I remember that we did talk about that in committee and try to figure out part of the cause. And I think it was because people weren't able to see him where he was. So, of course, at that time, the plaza wasn't going anywhere.
Just, this summer we did, although people haven't really been able to use it yet, we just improved the Bridge Street Pick and Save intersection.
Right.
For pedestrian crossings. We put some crosswalks in and put some don't walk signs. And that got budgeted for this summer. It'll obviously be used when the Bridge Street construction gets done, but that was about $65,000 just to improve that intersection. So, we could put this on the list and look at what that would take to do something like that, just for
I think
your
it's good to keep
information.
on the radar, for sure. Committee members, any other comments on the report? If not, we'll place this report on file, because that's what it's intended for. We don't have to take action on it this evening at all. Okay, seeing none, we'll place the report on file. Item number 7 is the 2020 construction projects update. At the beginning of the meeting, Alan passed out a status sheet of kind of where we're at with everything, and he'll kind of walk us through some of the larger stuff. Welcome.
So these are posted on Facebook, and they're also on the city's website. Lori posts them out there. So TJ and I try to put this together every week, either Wednesday or Thursday. So I can just, breeze through them here. Cedar Street was, the asphalt went on today. I don't know if they got it all on, but they got the binder course on today.
Yay!
Fulton Street, the extension down to the end, that is supposed to get paved next Monday and Tuesday, pavement striking by the end of the week, so that should be done by the end of next week. The Riverwalk project, they're going to get the trail paved here shortly. There's some problems with the current situation with COVID. They can't get the railing in. It's not scheduled to be delivered until the middle of November 23rd. So the railing won't go up until the snow's flying, which we can't really do anything about. It was supposed to be done earlier, but they're having supply problems. And then we've also, because it's so late in the year, we've decided to push the plantings into next spring. With the irrigation, they'll have a much better chance to live. So we've kind of pushed that out. Bridge Street repairs, working out on that. I know there's been some complaints on that, but I just want to point out that the contractor has been working. They only work 8-hour days, us only. I mean, most people work in 8-hour days, but they don't work a 12-hour day. They work till about 3 or 3:30, I believe. So I know there's been complaints when people come home from work, they don't see anybody working, but they're done at 3:30 with their day. So, but the plan for that is they're pouring this week and early into next week the abutments and the joints, and then the concrete overlay of the south half of the deck is supposed to happen the end of next week or maybe next weekend, or depending on what we do. I just want to let you know that we are contemplating, and we're pretty sure we're going to close down Bridge Street for that day, for this section of the pour. So that is going to be a major inconvenience, as I'm sure you're all aware, the amount of traffic that goes over Bridge Street. It's going to be a major detour. But we've received complaints on the finish and the ride of the first half of that deck. And I think what we're working out with our engineer in this is that we think if you've ever stood on that bridge or when a truck goes by, there's enough vibration that we think that some of that concrete got moved around, and we'll get a better finish if we close that bridge down. We're running into challenges with that because you can see we're going to detour people probably down 5th Street, but now if we bring them down 5th Street to Scott to get across, we know the mess that Scott's in right now. So it's going to be a major detour, but it's only going to be for a day.
Can you delay closing what McIndoe and let them go that way, or?
That work is scheduled to start Monday, so that pretty much is. No, I think when TJ and I were talking, I was talking about Eric a little bit, if people are coming down 5th waiting, I don't think a lot of them, if they want to go across the river, I don't think they're going to wait to go to Scott. They're probably going to cut down Grant. They're going to cut down McClellan. I think the people that want to get across the river are going to get over to First and go. So I don't think it'll be that huge of an issue. People will find the side streets and get to it. It's going to put pressure on Stewart, but just for the day. So, but we think of the end result, a 30-year fix or 20-year fix on Bridge Street is worth one day of inconvenience.
Well, and I think it helps too if we do a really good job of public information and ask people first to avoid that area or plan their alternate route. They can also get across on Thomas, rather than everyone trying to converge on the Scott Street Bridge. And, so often when we were talking about the Thomas Street project, we talked about the fact that when you live in a community that's split by water, you only have 3 points at which you're going to cross unless you wish to swim. So, we need to manage the logistics of that too. And this is really no different than, an emergency situation that would take that bridge out of commission. And I think it will, cause people to be mindful of the value of, that infrastructure. So one day, it doesn't seem like it's the end of the world if we get a better quality pour on there.
Do we know what day that might be?
Right now, it's tentatively for next Friday or Saturday.
Can we get out to the media a couple days ahead and actually get it out to?
We'll know. We're going to put PCMS boards on Bridge Street too, those flashing boards that say Bridge Street to close. We'll get those out early next week when we know for sure.
I'm leaving town that day.
Most
Hey,
of
Thomas
the
Street Bridge was closed all summer. This is one day.
One day, that's true. And a lot of the complaints that I think we've been hearing are more so about the sidewalk being closed than it is so much about the street being choked down to 2 lanes, because it really is difficult for people who walk to the grocery store and to Walgreens to not be able to walk on that sidewalk and get across there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we've come upon people walking in the traffic lanes, which is even worse. So, sooner than later.
We've worked with the bus rides are free right now. I don't know, we found that out too, and there are bus stops on each side of the Bridge Street, so people can take the bus across for free. So I know it's not the same as walking, but so there is that option. But we are pushing to get that sidewalk opened as soon as possible. And they are working, so I think we're in good shape to get that one done here by the end of October. Thomas Street siphon project, it's really no impact to traffic other than people see it every day, but that is expected to be completed by mid-November. 18th Avenue over by Shopko, pretty much completed. They're waiting for one little section of asphalt to get done, and that's completed. The pavement striping is done. 52 Parkway is the contract completion date is the end of next week. That's been an ongoing project. It probably lasted a little longer than most people expected. But they did have some issues too, getting some supplies for the irrigation system, but we're pushing them that they're not going to get a contract extension beyond next week. We want that opened up by the end of next week.
Perfect.
River Life Connector Trail, that's the one right down here by Dudley. All the sidewalk is in, the walls are in. They're going to start the landscaping and the asphalting. That should be done in the next 2 weeks. 3rd Street retaining wall behind the park, athletic park. The wall is about 95% complete, so that's moving right along. They'll get the sidewalk in there and get that done here this fall. The Bridge Street Pine Ridge Boulevard intersection is done, other than some it's open, paved, striped. It's open other than some small landscaping items. Okay. Scott Street signal upgrades just got going 2 weeks ago. And they're moving right along. It's supposed to be the end of November. That'll be done. So you'll start seeing signals go up and the new lights go up. McIndoe and second, so that's the project that's going to start October 12th when we close McIndoe. So that construction bulletin went out today that McIndoe Street will close on Monday. That's a permanent closure. So that traffic, like I say, but those PCMS boards have been up. You've probably seen them if you approach McIndoe Street. So that work will go on Monday. And the TDS fiber installation, that's always on here. They've probably been seeing some concrete repairs that have been going on Grand Avenue because of those. They still have I think they have 8 crews in town yet. They've lost a few crews. They've downsized a little bit, but there's still a lot of TDS fiber installation going on, which our office is trying to manage, and with some challenges, but it's going better this year than last.
Okay. Thank you for that update. That's very helpful. And so my understanding also, and I think everyone's heard my spiel in the past about contract provisions and completion dates. Completion dates aren't guidelines, they're firm completion dates. And so our contracts allow us the ability to find contractors that are late with their work when there's no mitigating circumstance or legitimate delay. And so I would certainly like to remind everybody that our committee has been real strong in the past on wanting to see liquidated damages charged when there's not a legitimate reason for delay. Now, supply delays and weather delays, we understand that. But, when it's a matter of, overbooking themselves and, they're pushed on one project to complete and then, leave ours sit, that's a different story. So I would like to see that be vetted out pretty close in the Board of Public Works. And, we have a real aversion to extensions after Halloween because we don't know when it's going to snow. And we've been caught twice before where we've been trying to plow a street where all the manhole covers are, an inch taller than the main course of asphalt. So, and we've had awful problems with leaf pickup when we can't finish construction. So hopefully we don't have a whole lot of people wanting extensions well into November because we just don't know.
I don't think there will be any. We've had a few minor extensions, but we got the projects out earlier this year to bid based upon some bad experiences in the past and put earlier completion dates on them. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Good.
To get the projects completed this year. I say with the lone exception will be that Thomas Street Trail. It'll be completed other than the landscaping, which I think everybody understands they will have a better chance of survival rather than
Right.
planting it in late October because they can't even get some of the plants. So I think we're in good shape with all the projects.
Right, and our main concern is vehicular traffic, but yeah, definitely. And I understand that, did Randolph and Cherry get paved today? District 7's been waiting a long time.
I asked at the end of the day, and they did pave today. I don't know if they got it done.
Okay.
They were out there all day paving, but I'm not sure they got it done. If not, if they didn't get it done today, it'll be done tomorrow.
Excellent. All right, sounds great. Anybody else have questions about the report? Jim, go ahead.
It sounds like a lot of projects you had this year. I want to thank Mr. Wazlowski and his staff for doing such a great job on this. It sounds like you had a lot to do this year. Thank you.
Had a really busy year, so excellent. That is a lot of progress that the public can, see and appreciate, and that's the kind of stuff that they want to see us do. So, all right, with that, oh, go ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say I've had a few neighbors around the parkway that have concerns. Some that are totally against any type of landscaping. Some are concerned about the major rock that seems to be pretty close to the curb, and so they're concerned about, is a lot of that going to be destroyed by the snow plows come winter. And I guess I didn't really know much about the history of what was being done on that.
Okay. We don't have any answers on that one either. It looks like. I mean, that's something that maybe Alan, you guys can maybe work with that offline outside the.
Those rocks do have a 2-foot clear zone from the back of the curb, which are consultant designed, so it allows some room. And as I guess people had questions about, those rocks are pulled back from the intersections, so there's none that'll be in the sight line of those intersections. So I mean, that was taken into account.
Perfect. All right. Okay, so with that, we have an addendum. I'll hold future agenda items till the end, which is number 8. Item number 9, we've got 2 items on the addendum. Item 9 is discussion and possible action on stop sign placement at the intersection of North First Street and McIndoe Street, and you've got some information in your packets on that. Given the closure that's coming on McIndoe to accommodate the Aspirus Hospital Clinic project, there's a recommendation to adjust those stop signs. TJ, do you have that one? You want to?
I do. So last time we swapped the streets, or the stop signs on 3rd Street. This is just to do a similar change where we put the stop signs on McIndoe and take them off of 1st, because the traffic volumes on 1st will likely be higher than the short section on McIndoe.
Sure, because we're just preserving McIndoe there anyway for access to Clover Belt, so that certainly makes sense. We did receive public comment today on this item from Kathy Volkman over at CCU. The committee members have all received her email. She did have some concerns about taking the stop sign out at 1st Street and, wondering if that creates, too long of a span for people to get ahead of steam up with speed, of course. She also acknowledged that we will likely approve the change based on our standards, but she just asked that we keep an eye on that area, and if there is either crash data or pedestrian and vehicle conflict, that we then take steps to address that in the future. So you all have her email, and we've entered that into public record as well. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This route, before closure, would be a pretty standard one. Like just for me, if I'm headed to the west side, I go down to 1st and then hook over to the bridge. And I understand why we would, do this change here on McIndoe. My concern is Fulton Street. I'm imagining that if you're like me, my default is going to go 1 block north, and I'm going to be coming down Fulton to get to 1st Street and then over to the bridge. I think Fulton's traffic volume will probably increase considerably, and also I went through there today, as a matter of fact, and that and I don't know how long it'll end up being there, but the ABC building wall corner, I mean, is at the corner. So you do, as per the message we got, you have to kind of inch out to look to the north, you know, for traffic. Now you're inching out and there's somebody coming this way. So what's the chances of us taking those stop signs from the McIndoe intersection and moving them a block north to protect Fulton Street, you know, and have it, you know, have them on First Street at that corner. We're going to have traffic going, matter of fact, through down Fulton right on to the Fulton extension as well. Imagine that traffic on Fulton will be a higher volume than traffic coming in from the north.
We don't have First and Fulton on our agenda, but that's certainly something that we could ask the staff to look at and bring us a separate item if they feel it's needed.
Okay.
You know, once that switches over. Jim?
I think we should probably table this request for now until we can do a study on Fulton, because it's probably going to be a substitute for McIndoe, because many people use McIndoe as a thoroughfare, so you wouldn't have to go through downtown to get to the west side, so.
Right, but if our
Then we should probably do that study before we change any signs around.
on this, well, and this would match what we did on Third and McIndoe, though. So, I mean, if we leave a block of street open basically to serve two private properties, which is kind of, I mean, it's really basically a makeshift driveway at this point. If we want the signs on the road less traveled, I think that's all they're asking us to do. But if we wanted to wait a month, you can do that, but the road is, McIndoe is closing next week.
If I can just jump in, I see no reason why we can't act on this, because the Fulton Street is another issue that we can, you know, look at our next meeting, most likely. But one doesn't really affect the other so much. I mean, other than because of the closure of McIndoe, yeah, we know Fulton is going to get more volume, but we're not talking about that tonight.
When we proposed the closure at McIndoe, we actually encouraged the motoring public to adjust to Fulton Street purposely because the right-of-way is real wide there.
Yeah.
And we did a parking restriction purposely for ease of travel. So, you know, I guess if our engineers feel that we need to take action on First and Fulton, we certainly could do that in the future. I mean, we'll know in short order what the impact is once that street closes. Even when we had it detoured for a little bit last summer, we did have a little test run of how that would operate. I don't think it went too bad, but, you know, we certainly could find out. Jim?
Can you restate the proposal?
The proposal is to adjust the stop sign placement at the intersection of North First Street and McIndoe Street, and it would move the stop signs from First Street to McIndoe. Right now, they're on First, so it would turn them, basically.
Yeah, that's, I stand by, we should probably not do anything until we do a study on,
First and Fulton. Alan, what do you think? I mean, there's really no harm in waiting necessarily. I mean, we could get some counts in there.
I guess that probably would be a through, even if we changed, even if it became a through street, and we were turning onto First, you'd want that sign gone anyway, so yeah, it's probably a good idea to move that.
Yeah, there's a map here that's showing on the second, because like you say, McIndoe is going to basically dead end into the YMCA parking, the Spirus parking lot. So it's really just going to serve a private, so I mean, we're anticipating that it's going to be a lot less traffic than First.
Okay, I would concur with that. We should look for the future, we're maybe studying that.
First and Fulton.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I know when we close, and we can, I don't know if we'll have enough time to really look at that impact on Fulton. If we close, we could, we could get them out if the snow doesn't fly, and then we could look at it then.
Right, definitely. And I mean, after a few weeks of that operation, we'll know a little more. Deb, go ahead.
I guess I wanted to make the point, and I do think it's worth deferring, but I ended up having cataracts taken out at the eye clinic like 6 or 7 years ago. And a friend of mine's sister from southern Portage County ended up with diabetes and bad eyesight. So over the years, I have talked to a number of people from the eye clinic, and I think you need to be aware that it's a regional center. They have people as far up north as Wabeno that come to Wausau and may not know their way around, or coming with an elder spouse that don't know their way around. So I think you need to really look at it as well as in the iClinic area of how it may affect traffic and for people that are wanting to get around. The other issue I wanted to bring up and didn't get to at the economic development is that sometimes those with diabetes issues and eyes, which normally are very serious issues, they're in the eye clinic for hours waiting for treatment or recovery one way or the other, and that there's no food in that area. So it's a question of trying to find other alternatives, or maybe work with the eye clinic about how to get around or the best way to navigate. But don't assume that it's going to be all just locals coming to the eye clinic. They're coming from a wide area, especially if there's major, serious, or emergency issues with their eyes.
Right, and important to note that the iClinic's clientele isn't all local, so we certainly can take that into account, and if we need to make modifications there going forward, we certainly can consider that, and we can even have the staff network with iClinic of Wisconsin if there's changes proposed. And we've done that in the past with the closure of McIndoe. We went and talked with the iClinic about that. So, I mean, I think those are all things we can do going forward. Do we have a motion, though, to act on this item tonight to turn those stop signs around? Motion from Neal, is there a second? Second by Wadinsky. Further discussion or comment? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Deb?
No.
Okay.
No.
You're voting no as well?
Yes.
Okay, so then let the record show that that item has passed 3-2. Item number 10 is discussion and possible action on repealing section 10.01.025, stop sign locations designated, and recreating as section 10.01.025, establishment of certain traffic limitations and rules, repealing section 10.01.030, yield right-of-way intersections, section 10.01.060, one-way streets, section 10.01.070, accident reports, section 10.24.010, right turns, section 10.24.020, left turns, and section 10.24.030, U-turns. And so that is a really wordy agenda item that we got that really kind of amounts to compliance with new standards and housekeeping. You've got a write-up in your packets from Tara talking about the adjustment that we need to make to the traffic ordinance to comply. Does anyone have questions for her on that item? Tara, do you have anything that you want to walk us through at all?
If you want me to, sure.
I see she did include a memo in the packets that explains what we're trying to achieve here. Does anyone have questions for Tara beyond that? If not, do we have a motion to approve the changes to the code? Motion by Wadinsky, is there a second? Second by Larson. Further comment or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. We'll hop back to item 8 real quick, which is future agenda items. Does anyone have anything that they know today that they want to see on a future agenda? Go ahead, Jim.
Regarding Boff Street, would this body have power to request the police department look into that or help us out with that situation there, or is that something that we can't do?
I think we can request targeted enforcement without committee action. So they can do that in response to any alder if we ask them to target that area.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Alder Larson.
When it comes to targeted enforcement, I guess I'm looking for some kind of accountability to know that it's actually being done. Does that come to me or?
You can request a report. So you would network with Lieutenant Buckner, and then they would, like they've done in my district, keep a log of what hours that enforcement occurred and what the result were in terms of warnings, tickets, and what their findings are. I've received those before with First Avenue and Campus Drive both. So you can request that individually from him.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Committee members, anything? Oh, Deb, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, I was hoping Alan or the DPW could look into, is there some type of signs like for a hilly area that might be kind of a blind intersection, not necessarily for young children crossing, but for seniors who are disabled and have scooters. I just don't know if the signs have kept up with that kind of the change in age, and a lot more baby boomers with disabilities that are trying to get around, and people may not be aware. There's a lot of scooters that may be used in certain areas where there are no sidewalks.
Okay, that's certainly something we can look at. I don't know that we need to have committee action on it necessarily, because that's something that they can look into without a committee directive. Anything else? If not, if anything comes up in the meantime, you guys know where to find me. Let me know, and we'll get the items put on if we need to take action. That's the end of our agenda for tonight, so I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Oh, Alan, come on, one more thing.
We are contemplating, one item that we're thinking about putting is 2nd Street from, what street is that, Eric? Short to DeKalb for possible CDGB funding.
Yes.
So if you guys have a chance to review that street, we can go to a different CDGB street, but that is one. We did put CDGB funding on 1st Street, so this block would help clean up that area, and then, so that is one area we're thinking about. That'll be an agenda item for next month.
Okay. We can certainly talk about that. We do need to talk about block grant funding in that block. We talked about this just briefly in economic development Tuesday night. Given the projects that are proposed there, and the fact that one developer owns nearly both sides of the block down there, we wanted to take a look and see if there was any other street project in a low-income census tract where the property owners would benefit more from the block grant funds before we would commit them to that street, where we're looking at a commercial real estate development. That was the one concern that we had in ED, was if we have other projects going on in census tracts that need help worse, we would want to know that.
Yeah, I mean, the LMI, the low to moderate income area, is a huge area. If you've got a chance to look at that map, and we can include that. The funding would probably be limited to one block, unfortunately. The funding is about $125,000 to $175,000 is probably the range we'd be looking at. That's not with utilities, so the sewer and water utilities would pay for their portion. This would just pay for the road and the storm sewer. So we could definitely look at other areas. We'd probably, that is a nice one-block stretch, but we're definitely open to looking at other stretches of streets too, if that would apply.
I want to do it specifically because we're looking at a development with Blinker Construction where they would build market rate housing in that block, high-density market rate housing, and they are a for-profit company and certainly could afford an assessment more than a low-income resident could. And so we were real concerned about that in ED, is to take a look and see if you have any other project on the horizon that needs that money worse. Because part of the development agreement that the guy has requested is that we put in a road and incentivize the project. And we argued a little bit about that Tuesday night. So let's do that analysis first and just make sure that we don't have other areas that need that money way worse. I know we have a time constraint with which we have to spend it down, but if there's something else that could benefit other people that could benefit more, we were wanting to do that.
Yeah, I understand your concern. This project, and not that we can't shift, but this project was contemplated before we even had that, the request to rebuild the road.
Right.
I hadn't even seen the proposal to put all those houses in there, so I kind of was doing it without knowing that. But if it makes sense to shift it to another road, we could definitely shift gears, and so we'll come up with some. If you guys want to look at streets in your area, but it would kind of have to make sense with almost a one-block area that's not part of a much larger project. It would have to be kind of an isolated area. So TJ and I will work on something.
I think it's better for you guys to do that because you know what our backlog looks like and where those census tracts are. And if we just take a dartboard approach, we will draw criticism no matter what. So if you guys have an alternate proposal, I think we'd want to hear it. Obviously, this isn't on our agenda because we're on future agenda items, and our future agenda item could be figuring this out.
So that'll come your way next month.
Okay, Jim?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Wadinsky. Is there a second? Second by Larson. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.